you. I want to move on to another cyber matter. And that is in relation to the legislation that passed the US Congress and signed by the President requiring ByteDance to divest its ownership of TikTok or face a ban in the United States, which will take place in the next 9 to 12 months. Has the Minister sought a briefing from the Department on the implications of these developments for Australia?
Senator, we've been talking with Minister O'Neill's office about particularly TikTok. The Minister's office have asked us to do engagement across a whole range of entities, including TikTok themselves and the United States government. So we've had lots of discussions about the divestment legislation and have been briefing the Minister's office and keeping them up to date. And there's a briefing scheduled for the Minister in depth on the issue, and so we've been keeping them up to date.
So I take from your answer the Minister hasn't been briefed, but her office has?
I think the Ministers certainly had discussions with the Department.
And Senator, I think the discussions that Hamish and Mr Hansford and his crew have been having with the office are in order to brief the Minister.
But it sounds like there's an upcoming briefing in detail, and I assume that means because there hasn't been a briefing for the Minister in detail previously.
Well, Mr Hansford hasn't delivered that briefing, but I think it would not be right to say she hasn't been briefed because...
Not by the Department, that's all.
Not by the Department.
All you know is the Department's briefing, that's all I'm asking about.
Since the divestment. Of course, the Minister has had a range of briefings on TikTok, intelligence on TikTok, a social media review that relates to TikTok, elements in the cyber strategy which relate to data security.
Yeah, indeed. The social media review you just mentioned that the Minister commissioned, has any policy change arisen from that review?
Certainly. So Mr Anstey might outline the elements that are in the cyber strategy in relation to that stem from that thinking.
So without speaking to the specific content of the review, Senator, and I think we've covered that terrain before, in terms of some of the policy measures that are related to that area, many of them are captured in the cybersecurity strategy document proper. Most of those relate to the management of data security issues. So, for example, we are conducting a review into the data brokerage ecosystem and exploring options to restrict unwanted transfer of data to malicious actor via data markets. We're looking at developing a framework into vendor risk, which we've discussed previously, as well as looking at data sets of national significance. So where there are data sets that aren't currently regulated under, for example, the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, how we can identify those data sets and wrap appropriate protections around them.
I don't mean to diminish the importance of that work, which I'm very supportive of, but none of that sounds like policy change to me, which is my question to Mr Hansford. You know, in your answer, Mr Answer, you said we're looking to develop, we're developing, none of that is concrete change. That's the point I'm making. Is that fair?
If your point, Senator, is that we haven't had a sort of change in regulation or legislation,
yes.
I think that would be preemptive while we're still scoping and designing the appropriate policies.
Yes. So, to my point, no legislative or regulatory changes come out of the social media review. Is it still the government's intention to respond to the recommendations of the Senate Select Committee on foreign interference through social media?
Yes.
Yep. Has the department provided advice on that report to government?
Certainly have provided advice to the Minister on the report.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. I'm not sure.
Certainly have provided advice to Minister O'Neill on that report, yes.
When did you do so?
Mr Anstey, do you have the date about the... And actually, I think Mr Smythe, you might have coordinated that holistically and provided that as a single report.
Can I take that on notice as to what dates, if there were, in relation to that being made available? Sorry, Nathan Smythe, Deputy Secretary, National Security and Resilience. So I do have it here. The latest version of the draft was provided to the Office of the Minister for Home Affairs for consideration on the 24th of April.
24th of April. And so by latest draft, I presume there were then previous drafts. When was the first draft of the response provided?
I'd have to take that on notice, Senator, but certainly the government's considering the draft response and the recommendation from both reports.
Okay, thank you. Turning to the substance of the US legislation, what's the department's view about whether and how it will apply to TikTok Australia if TikTok complies with the legislative requirement in the United States? Will that mean that TikTok Australia is also divested, or will that not be the case?
Senator, without wanting to provide analysis on the way the company structures, I think that legislation would divest TikTok in the United States, which I think is 10% of TikTok's market. I don't think it would relate to the 90% unless TikTok decided to make that a ubiquitous solution for TikTok Global, if I could put it like that. But again, that's really a matter for the company.
Of course. But that's an important point, because I think some people might be hopeful that the United States has done the heavy lifting and solved this problem for us. But if it only applies to TikTok USA and it doesn't apply to TikTok Australia, or as you say, TikTok in any other jurisdiction, then that puts an obligation on us to do something if we think it's a problem.
Which is why the government has asked us to work with the United States, and we have had a number of engagements with the United States government, Mr Anstey in person, and as late as last Friday with the Department of Homeland Security.
That's encouraging. So is it your view that if Australia decided to go down the pathway of believing that divestment was necessary from our national security point of view, and I'm not asking you to comment on whether that's the case or not, but if we form that view, that legislative change would be necessary in Australia to facilitate that?
I think in order for the government to require divestment, without wanting to provide advice to you, that would be something I don't know if we could do it without legislative change, but we'd have to look at that, and that's why we're looking at it and talking to the US government.
Yeah, I mean, it's a genuine question. I'm not aware either whether the Foreign Investment Review Board or SOCI or any of the communications legislation provides government with the power to order that without legislative change.
Indeed.
Right, and so I'm taking from your answer that that's your view too, that there doesn't appear to be any existing legislative power to require that.
I think just prima facie, not that I can think of, but again, we're looking at the issue.
Okay, that's welcome. I might leave that issue there and move on to other matters with your agreement.